Thank you for attending the ELT training session organized by Ricardo Palma University and SBS Librería Internacional. My name is Simon Schwarzenberg, and I'm honored to present today's speaker. Indira Leon is actually one of the teachers from the Specialization program in English language teaching at Ricardo Palma University. And well, today's conference, you can see the name is Error Correction, From Theory to Practice. Oh, let me see over here. So Indira is an experienced English instructor with 20 plus years teaching all levels. She has seen the steps English students take from the very beginning in their learning process until they get international certifications. She has been a proctor and conducted interviews with candidates from international exams, such as the ECCE, ECPE, etc., right, and others. And during her career at a binational center, she has participated in pilot programs to implement teaching techniques, delivered methodology and teaching practice courses, elaborated training material for new teachers, and of course, planned hundreds of lessons. So please welcome Indira Leon.
Hi, thank you very much, Simon. Thank you for the nice introduction. And let me see, I'm sharing in a second. And confirm that you can see my screen. Yes?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much to all the attendees, fellow teachers. Thank you for joining me in this presentation that is such an important part of our job, right? Error correction is constant in our job. And today we are going to go over some strategies, some ideas to make it more effective, right? We will see definitely some ideas and some strategies that you are familiar with, but hopefully we will discuss some others that help us see things in a different way. So first, I would like to introduce you to this man here. His name is Scott Barry Kaufman. He is a professional cello player. He is a musician, but he is also a psychologist and author, and he holds a degree from Carnegie Mellon University and a PhD from Yale University. And he has a very admirable career, right? His story wouldn't be much more different from other professionals if it weren't for his childhood. Scott Barry Kaufman had a very difficult childhood. Why is that? As a child, he usually came down with many ear infections. He was constantly taken to the hospital because of these infections, and that prevented him from understanding verbal cues effectively, which means that he didn't do very well in school. His grades were actually very, very poor. And when he was given the IQ test, his result was so low that he was taken to a school for people with special needs. That's how low his grades were. Now, all his childhood was pretty much the same up until he was age 14. What changed at age 14? He met a teacher. Of course, it had to be a teacher, right? A teacher who had the ability to observe that he had potential for some other things. A teacher who was paying attention, yes, to what he did and how he behaved. And since he was already 14 years old, this teacher approached him and said, hey, why are you not taking more challenging classes, more challenging courses? So that made him think. Nobody had told him that before. In fact, he had never questioned where he was. his place at that school because everyone had told him so. Everyone had told him that was what he needed. Previous teachers, principals, his parents, society, and of course he had the results of scores, the results of tests, no question, right? But thanks to this teacher that he met at age 14, he started thinking about other possibilities. What if he actually had potential for something else? Starting this point, he started taking different classes, different courses. He tried his hand at many different things. Latin, cello, you name it, he did it. Of course, he did not succeed in many of them, but something important happened. He learned to learn. He realized he could learn. So in one of these courses that he took back then, he came across a cello class. This is him at age probably 14, 15, very, very young. And talking to his grandfather, he realized, or he learned, that his grandfather had been a cello player. So he started taking lessons with his grandfather. And the way you see him in this picture is him taking probably or doing 6 to 9 hours of practice every day until he reached a very good level. It was so good that it was actually his ticket to enter the university. Because remember, his grades, his academic grades were very, very low. So he could not just apply. He had to find some other way to enter the university, and he did want to study psychology. What this story illustrates is how over time, with enough effort, but also working not just hard, but smart, students can actually reach their full potential. They can actually overcome mistakes, move past errors, and go to the next level. This is a little bit of what we are going to see today, and we are going to connect it to our everyday classes, our our English language teaching. So the topics that we are going to see today are basically three areas we are going to cover. The first one is definitions of errors and mistakes. You see, if we have to identify inaccuracies, and if we have to take action, then we might as well learn with the basics, that is the definitions. What are we looking for? Then we're going to see elements to consider in effective error correction. Why is that? Because when we think of error correction, most of the times we think of, the cognitive aspect. We think about what students need to learn, the grammar they have to learn, the vocabulary they have to acquire, the pronunciation they have to polish, and that is okay. But it's not only the cognitive aspect we have to consider. And finally, we will see correction techniques according to each skill. Yes, that's true. Because once again, when you do quick research or when you think about error correction, the first thing that comes to mind is, speaking. And that is true. But it's not the only skill where we should pay attention and actually take action towards these inaccuracies. We have correction in each of the skills. So let's start with the definitions. According to Merriam-Webster, error, well, these are the main two definitions, is an act involving an unintentional deviation from truth or accuracy. Let's see here. Yeah, that's better. And the second definition is something produced by mistake. But what is a mistake? According to the same source, a mistake is a wrong judgment, or it's a wrong action or statement proceeding from faulty judgment, inadequate knowledge, or inattention. Yes, so they are very closely related. Of course, sometimes they are even used interchangeably, and that is generally okay. But at the very beginning, we're going to make a difference for a very specific reason. How does this translate to our world, in ELT? There are many differences that you will find out there, but the one provided by Dr. Hossein Nasaji, a professor and linguist at the University of Victoria, seemed the simplest to me, straightforward and simple. And that is the following. Errors are defined as deviations that are competence-based and occur as a result of a lack of knowledge. Mistakes, however, are performance-related and occur even though the learner has the knowledge. I know that these terms might remind you of something, right? Some of them ring a bell. And you might remember last month's presentation by Simon Schwarzenberg, right? In his presentation, Achieving Communicative Competence, he basically concluded that competence is the ability that students have. Well, some of them still don't have it. They are in the process of strengthening that competence, but that is basically the definition, what they have. While performance is what they can show, what they demonstrate in class or outside of class or during any interaction. Why is this difference important? It is important because they might need different approaches to correction. If we have a student who doesn't have the competence yet, we might need to focus on rules and explanations, on very laser-focused activities. But if, on the other hand, we have students who are making mistakes, they don't need another explanation of the verb to be. They don't need another explanation of third person S and simple present, because they already know it. They might need additional practice, different contexts in which they can see how the language works. They need another approach to correction. So that's why it's important to notice the difference between competence and performance, errors and mistakes. Okay, so what we are going to do with these definitions is we're going to have a look at 6 statements from different levels. And I would like you to please write in the chat box if you think they are errors or mistakes. And the first one is, a B2 student says, I have go to the store. I have go to the store. I read you in the comments. Is that an error or a mistake? Do you think the student have the competence? Does he have the competence? Mistake. That's a mistake. Some people think it's error, and that is a mistake. Correct. Why? Because if we consider the level of the student, B2, that's an independent user of the language. So probably due to inattention, yes, he forgot to conjugate the verb appropriately, but he does know the rule, or he has been taught how to elaborate, how to create a sentence using the present perfect. So that will be a mistake. Let's see the second one. An A1 student says, because teacher, because. Instead of why teacher? Thank you, Carlos. Carlos says it's an error. Does everybody agree? Thank you, Leslie. Christian, error for sure. Thank you. I think all of you agree. Error. Because once again, he's an A1 student. He's just starting. He does not know the difference. Probably he looked it up in the dictionary, but of course, it's not being used correctly. That's an error, lack of competence. Number 3, B1 student says, it's delicious and easy preparation. It's delicious and easy preparation. What's that? Error, mistake, disagreement. I like disagreement. That is a mistake. That is a mistake. A B1 student is someone who has moved past the initial stage. And chances are he has had the opportunity to learn adjectives followed by infinitive, right? So probably he forgot, he just have to refresh some ideas, but that's basically a mistake. 4, a B2 student says, I went out without a sweater because I got sick. I went out without a sweater because I got sick. And that is a mistake. Thank you, Leslie. Mistake, Christian. Thank you, Marcella, Marlene, mistake. And that is correct. You got that right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Aldo, Maria. That is a mistake. Once again, we think about the level of the student. He just, definitely he knows how to identify the effect and the cause effect. If he got them all mixed up here, it was, it could be for many different reasons, but not knowing theory, it's not one of them, right? Number 5, we have 2 more, 5 and 6. 5 says, an A2 student says, my sister is embarrassed of 3 months. What do you think that is? It's an A2 student. Error, mistake, error, mistake, error. That is an error. He's still in the early stages of learning. And this is a false cognate. So there's, this is a word that creates confusion in early stages of learning. And the last one, an A1 student says, this is me grandmother. This is me grandmother. That is, some people say it's a mistake, it's a mistake, it's a mistake. Actually, that's an error. Yeah, thank you, Olga. Thank you, Karin. That's an error. He's a beginner. He is a beginner. Now, depending on the situation, it might be a mistake because probably he has already been taught how to say my grandmother. That's one of the first things your students learn. Chances are he has already seen that. In that case, it would be a mistake. But just guessing from the level, chances are is an error. Okay, great. So this is a little bit of what students know. Mistake, or what students make, mistake and error. Now, I would like to pause here and think about the holistic view we mentioned earlier. When we talk about error correction, the first thing that comes to mind is the cognitive aspect. And that is okay. That is okay. But just as important is what they think, how they feel, and of course, what they know. Yes, we are going to develop the ideas in each of these 3 groups, what they think, how they feel, and what they know, because these 3 components make our correction more effective and long-lasting. So some people might be thinking, Yeah, it's okay if students get a little bit frustrated, right? No pain, no gain. That is true. But we have to keep in mind that some students are too harsh with themselves. That could even happen to some of us too. We have been in that situation. So it's not difficult to guess how hard some students could be with themselves. So this sets the mood and affects the motivation that is crucial for learning. So we have to keep an eye on that as well. Let's talk about the first one. What they think. What they think. In this case, I would like to talk about, positive self-talk. But first, just self-talk, and of course, making emphasis on positive self-talk. You know, all of us have been here. We have a very nice conversation with ourselves. We sometimes have these dialogues and we can come up with very clever ideas or smart responses to something that happened 5 minutes ago. Yes, that conversation didn't finish there. We continue with that conversation in our head. And according to what scientists say, that is okay, because it helps us analyze and break into smaller parts what just happened. That is why we have this self-talk, but it also helps us rehearse future situations. Yes. Now, some scientists say that talking to ourselves is even therapeutical because it's like talking to somebody else. It's like talking to another person. So my question is, if we are going to talk to another person, how do we want that other person to be? Chances are we want to talk to someone nice, to someone friendly, someone who gives us feedback, but someone who's not toxic. So why would we be that toxic person? If we wouldn't approach a toxic person to find advice or to exchange ideas with, why should we do it with ourselves? So positive self-talk is important. And here is another perspective. This is not only the students' self-talk. We have to talk about our self-talk as teachers. Why? You don't have to answer that question, but I would really like you to take this as an invitation to reflect on it. Has it ever crossed your mind when you see a student making a mistake that does not correspond to his level, or when you see a student making a mistake over and over again? Have you ever thought, hey, geez, English is not for this student? Don't answer that. But if that is the case, we have to watch that, because we can transmit that to our students. If we think that, inevitably, they will realize. And according to a recent study conducted in 2019, they said that setting high standards, high expectations for our students' performance is something that helps our students move the limits a little bit farther, push a little bit farther, and do their best. So we don't have to lie to them. We don't have to say, oh yeah, really good, when the answer was not good. Or you can do it, when we know there's still a long way ahead. We don't have to lie to them, but we have to see how we think, because that's backed up by science. Here we are not talking about magical positivity. No. Here what we have in the screen is 2 neurons. Yes. On the left, we have a presynaptic or sending cell. And on the right, we have a postsynaptic or receiving cell. And here in the middle, yes, we have where they start communicating, where they connect. So when our students start learning the language, neurons that didn't communicate before start communicating, start sending signals. If that happens once or twice, it vanishes, it disappears. But if they do it over and over again, then this communication gets stronger. An example that I like to think of is, think of this. You need to cross a bridge, yes? And you go to the authorities and say, you know what, we need a bridge here because I cross this river twice a year. What do you think they will tell us? Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Because it's only one person crossing it, not so frequently, twice a year. But if on the other hand, they see that there is constant activity and a lot of people need that bridge, probably the bridge will be built. Our brain behaves in a similar way. If there's sporadic communication between two neurons or between neurons, if it happens once or twice, that's not going to last. But if this is constant, then our brain is going to invest the resources to strengthen this connection that is new and make it long-lasting. This is a quick summary of what many scientists like Dr. Lara Boyd have been researching on. Neuroplasticity. What they have found, which is so nice, what they have found is that our brain changes basically in 3 different ways. It changes at a chemical level when we think, when we start doing something new, when we start learning something, these neurons send chemical signals, and that triggers actions and reactions, according to what she says. Our brain also changes at a structural level because, as we said, it's like a bridge. It's going to be stronger the more opportunities we give them to use it. If we use it more frequently, it will actually change at a structural level. That will become stronger. And then at a functional level, because there are different areas of our brain communicating, connecting. And this is important because some students think, yeah, for pronunciation, for example, yeah, I know the theory. I know that it sounds z for voiced endings and s for voiceless endings, but they don't repeat. They don't do it. That is, our speech organs are also affected by these electric activity. So the more we do it, the better our performance will be. But we have to do it. Our students have to do it. I always give this example. It's like going to the gym. Yes, when you go to the gym, you don't lift a weight once or twice and then go to the cafeteria. That's not possible because otherwise you will not see results. The same thing happens with your speech organs. If you say the new word once, there are not going to be results. Yes, here we have muscles that are getting adjusted to new sounds. Don't do it once, twice. Do it constantly. And eventually, these changes will come to surface. Now, the next aspect is how they feel. There was a recent study, same study in 2019, in which they compared 2 groups of students of French. Yes, they were French students. And they noticed that beginners learned more from their successes than from their failures. Why is that? And that makes sense because when they are just learning the language, they're trying to figure out if it is something they will like, if it's something worth their time, their effort. So beginners respond better to success. Yes, they feel more motivated. And independent users, on the other hand, or more advanced users of the language, are more tolerant to direct correction because they want to be more efficient. So they are more tolerant to direct feedback or direct correction. It's a marathon, not a sprint. In her book, Grit, Dr. Angela Duckworth talks about this term that summarizes talent plus effort over an extended period of time. That is what she calls grit. And that is the key to success. Once again, it's talent plus effort over an extended period of time. Does anybody know more or less how many hours it takes for one A1 student, very beginner, to move to A2, from A1 to A2? You can guess, or if you know the answer, you're more than welcome to share it. How many hours does it take? No? Approximately 150 to 200 hours. So it's approximately 150 to 200 hours of guided practice, not independent work, guided practice to move from stage 1 to stage 2, that is A1 to A2. And something similar from A2 to B1. Now, if they are in the upper levels, it takes a little bit longer to make this transition. But this illustrates what we are discussing. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if our students get demotivated and demoralized at the very beginning, they are not going to stay long enough for them to see results. Yes. And it's not that they are not making progress. The progress is not evident yet. What we said at the beginning, competence and performance. They are strengthening their competence, but it can show in their performance if they put in the effort over a period of time. So that's why it's important to watch how they feel, what they think, how they feel, and no shame. No shame. We have talked about Dr. Brené Brown before. She's an American author and researcher that studies vulnerability, right? And in summary, what she says is that, when we make a mistake, and that's not rocket science, when we make a mistake, we feel bad. Yes, we have this sensation of, oh, I'm losing face. Oh, I don't feel confident anymore. But that is an initial reaction. The problem is when we associate that initial feeling to our core, to our self-worth. Then is when shame takes place. Yes, that's what we have to prevent from happening. So we as teachers have to create an environment in class in which our students make mistakes and they know they are not going to lose face in front of their classmates or in front of the teacher. No matter how many mistakes they make, they can still correct them and improve. And that is not going to, if they make mistakes, that does not mean that they are not smart or it's that's connected to their self-worth in any way. That's not what that means. We as teachers have the responsibility to make this possible. And sometimes when you as a teacher, you open up, that is an invitation for students to do the same thing. And I can always share this true story. I don't like, or at least I didn't like, accounting. I had a hard time. But there was a moment in my life when I really needed it. So I had to take the same seminar. I promise, it's true. I had to take the same seminar 3 times to grasp the concepts that I needed for work. 3 times. But I made peace with it. It's not that I didn't learn. I was much slower in that field, but there are other areas in which I am much, much faster. So if you share similar stories with your students, they will realize there's no shame in moving slower. You still make progress, but it's a different pace. It's just that. Now, let's move to our third area, that is what they know. Our third element of this holistic view, that is what they know. We have seen what they think, what we think as teachers, how they feel, and now what they know. We're just going to have a quick look at this, but we delve in these topics a little bit deeper in the specialization program in English language teaching that we have here at Ricardo Palma University. But basically, if we have to talk about error correction, we can see that the definition or the concept of error has changed over time. Yes, from audiolingualism at the very beginning until now, things have changed a little bit. Correction is still necessary, but the term is not used so frequently anymore. Now we welcome the term feedback. And there's a reason for that. Correction gives the idea of spotting something that is inaccurate and substituting it for something that is correct, for something that is accurate, and that is okay. But feedback goes beyond. How? The example I always give to my students is this. If an A1 student says, when you ask him, where are you from? The student that is very basic says, I am from, let's say, Lima, Peru. Is the sentence correct? Absolutely. Claps for the student. If an A2 student says, oh, where are you from? I'm from Lima, Peru. Good. The sentence is still good. But if a B1, B2, C1 student continues saying, oh, I'm from Lima, Peru. I'm from Lima, Peru. There's a problem. What is the problem? I mean, the sentence is correct. You don't have to correct the sentence. There's no error correction. However, there's space for feedback. Why? Because the answer that your student's giving doesn't reflect the level anymore. Your student's not taking risks. It's not manipulating or taking risks with new language. So he's at the shore. He's in the safe space of, I'm from Lima, Peru. I'm from Lima, Peru. But we know that students, more advanced students, have the possibility to say, oh, I'm from Lima, Peru, or I was born in Cusco, but I've lived in Lima all my life, or I am from Lima, Peru, or you can imagine how that city has changed. Give additional information, give spontaneous information. So your students have the possibility to move forward if we give feedback, not only correct mistakes. So that is one. Yeah, thank you, Lilia. Thank you. That's true. That has happened to all of us, I think, right? So it's very important to correct mistakes, but also push them farther with feedback that helps them reach that performance that reflects their actual level. So when you talk to someone probably who's not a teacher and you say, oh yeah, I correct mistakes, it might sound too easy. You have to correct mistakes. Something's wrong, you give the correct answer. That's it, right? Not really. We look more like chemists, yes, trying to balance lots of different components. We have to think about when to make the correction, at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, immediately. We have to see how to make the correction. Is it going to be on paper? Is it going to be orally? Is it going to be with gestures? You have to think about who is going to make that correction. Does it necessarily have to be the teacher? Could it be peer correction? You also have to consider if it's a beginner or if it's a more independent user of the language, because of what we said earlier. Remember, if they are beginners, then we may want to focus on their successes. We may want to focus on how they have progressed and then make some corrections. But if they are more independent users, we can be a little bit more straightforward. We also have to consider what kind of skill we are working on at the moment. Is it a productive skill? Is it a receptive skill? So error correction is nothing, but easy. Yes, it's not easy at all. It's not simple. Wait a second. Yes, that's right. I'm moving some icons here on my screen. So let's start with speaking, because as we said at the beginning, when we think of error correction, the first thing that crosses our mind is, do we do it now? Is it fluency? Is it accuracy that we're focusing on? So I would like you to watch this clip. You're going to see an interaction. Please, 2 questions. First, think about how the person who was interrupted felt. How do you think she felt? And second, was that necessary? Let's watch.
You're telling a friend an amazing story, and you just get to the best part when suddenly he interrupts. The alien and I, not me and the alien. Most of us would probably be annoyed, but aside from the rude interruption, does your friend have a point? Was your sentence actually grammatically incorrect? And if he still understood it, why does it even matter?
Okay, that's it. So in the chat box, could you say, how do you think the person who was interrupted felt? How did she feel? Not so well. I agree. Ashamed. Thank you, Lilia. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Raul. Offended, probably, although, yeah, that's right. Eric, upset, probably, bad, confused, disappointed, uncomfortable. Great. So all of them, bad feelings. Why? Because it was a rude interruption. Now, do you think the interruption was necessary at that point? Nervous, perhaps? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Francis. It was not necessary. I agree, Erica. Thank you, Aldo. No, not really. It was not necessary. Okay. So if this conversation were an activity in our classes, what part would that be? Do you think that would be the leading, the practice stage? If this conversation, imagine this conversation is one activity in your class. What part of your class would that be? Would that be the leading? Would that be the practice stage? Would that be the production part? Oral production, Eric and CSS, oral production would be? Yes. Production at the end. Thank you. Okay. So this is what, this is what Jim Scrivener says. He basically identifies 2 main areas or 2 main corrections, right? Immediate correction and delayed correction. So immediate correction is better tolerated for accuracy. activities. And if we have our all-time favorite approach, PPP, when would that be? That would be in the practice stage, yes? So immediate correction is suggested for accuracy activities, and they usually take place in the practice stage. Good. What about delayed correction? Delayed correction is suggested for fluency activities, and that usually happens in the last part, in the production stage. The same way we saw the conversation in the video, that would be a production activity. So it would require delayed correction, not the interruption that we saw. Now, in the practice stage, in which we usually focus on accuracy, we have some of these techniques. There are many. You know, there are many different techniques, and you can even come up with your own after you have tried some of them. We have recasts. Yes, that is when your student makes a mistake and you give the correct answer. Yes, you don't say exactly where the mistake is, but you substitute it for the correct answer. Recasts. You have explicit correction. Yes, you point out what the mistake was and substitute it for the correct version of it. You can use facial expressions. You can use, like raising your eyebrow, the typical. Finger correction. I like this one, especially for pronunciation or for identification of syllables. For example, you might remember your students when they say, yeah, I sent him three message. Okay, how many syllables does he have in singular? Message, 2 syllables. So in plural, one additional syllable. Messages. So you make it very visual if you use finger correction. You can repeat the sentence up to the error, and then the student will correct that remaining part. You can use metalinguistic feedback. We will see some of them in a short video later, but metalinguistic feedback is basically not giving the exact correct answer, but giving information about the rule. Yes, you give information about the rule of simple present, but you don't tell him it's takes, not take. No, you don't give the correct answer. You guide the student with surrounding information for him to realize, or remember what he already knows. And immediate correction can also be peer correction. If they're already working in groups or in pairs, something similar to what we saw in the video could happen. Yes, it's not me and the alien. Right? Now, which one is the best correction technique? That question cannot be answered. The ideal thing is to give it a try, to give most of them a try, to switch from technique to technique and see which one works better for what class or for what topic, and see how students respond to that technique, because the technique could be really good. However, the student might not notice what you want to say. And we'll see an example with recasts. Do you remember the sitcom Friends? Tell me you do, please. I don't want to feel old. The sitcom Friends has an episode in which Phoebe needs to teach French to Joey. Yes, there are 2 characters there. And Joey has, yay, thank you. Joey has an audition and he said he spoke French. Now he's desperate to learn French. He knows nothing. So in this clip, we will see what Phoebe does to correct him and the reaction of her interlocutor. Here.
All right, this seems pretty simple. Your first line is, my name is Claude. So just repeat after me. Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te coupe plow.
Well, let's try it again.
Okay.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je t'appelle Blue.
Huh. It's not quite what I'm saying.
Really? Sounds exactly the same to me.
It does? Really?
Yeah.
All right, let's just try it again.
Okay.
Really listen.
Got it.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te flou flee.
Oh, mon Dieu.
Oh, de fouf.
Okay, what just happened? Phoebe started saying the right answer over and over again. But to Joey, it sounded exactly the same to what he was producing. He did not notice the difference. So the technique might work with some students, but it might not work with others. We have to be careful. That's why it's always recommendable to use different techniques, because it may be misunderstood by the student. Now, what about the last stage? We have already seen immediate correction in oral production. Yes, fluency. What happens now that you are focusing on fluency? Similar to the video, you want to communicate an idea, you want to tell the story of the alien. So in this case, what is suggested is delayed correction. Maybe you can make a quiz with their mistakes and give it to them the following day, or you can ask a student to bring a quiz. This is a suggestion I like because of what we said earlier, setting expectations, setting higher expectations for your students. If they notice that you are trusting them with an activity or you're trusting them with something, they are going to do their best. Chances are they are going to push harder and they are going to not want to disappoint you. So if you ask a student to bring, let's say, give me 5 sentences for tomorrow, give me 5 sentences that have at least one mistake in the simple present. And that is what you can use to test your students the following day or to review some of the concepts they have seen. You can correct also these mistakes as a whole class right after the activity. This is what most of us do. We just walk around and monitor, take notes, and we then write it on the board. We can give the correction or our students can correct the sentences. So these are some of the most frequent. The last one has an asterisk because sometimes our students ask us to be corrected. When they know we're monitoring, they are having a conversation and they say, hey, excuse me, teacher, is this correct? Or I want to tell him this. Is this correct? So sometimes we can look for spaces to make correction, but sometimes it's just spontaneous and students want to be corrected. Okay, now this video lasts 3 minutes, but we will see some of the error correction techniques in action. It's a little bit staged, but still very clear. Here we go.
Often teachers are unsure of how to correct students' errors. We could recognize errors and decide what and how much to correct, but we get nervous when it comes to really doing the error correction. Here are some commonly used error correction techniques. My students have been learning the simple past tense using daily routines and activities. During a Q&A drill on the simple past tense, my students made several mistakes that I felt needed correction. I used different techniques to make the corrections. You will see explicit correction, where the teacher gives both an explanation and the corrected form, metalinguistic feedback, which provides questions or information about form without giving the correct form, and elicitation, which shows the teacher refraining from giving the correct form but guides the student to self-correction. In this example, I used the board as an aid in correcting the student. This also includes sentence completion. It's asking for examples or direct questions. For example, or how do we say in English? And finally, repetition, where the teacher repeats the error in isolation, often adjusting intonation so as to highlight the error. Regardless of the technique used, teachers need to help students recognize that they made the mistake, identify the mistake, and repeat the whole sentence correctly before moving on. So Nancy, tell me, what did you do yesterday?
I ran in the park.
Great. Did you run fast or slowly?
Fastly.
Fastly. Fast does not take the ly, only fast.
Okay.
I ran fast.
I ran fast.
Very good. So Abdul, tell me what you did yesterday.
Yesterday I watched a movie.
How do we say something in the past?
Watch it.
Watched a movie.
Yes.
Very good.
I
We
heard
use
ED.
ED. Excellent. So I watched a movie.
So yesterday I watched a movie.
Excellent. Anna, what did you do yesterday?
I bought some sweater.
I'm sorry, you bought some.
Sweater?
How many did you buy?
2.
2. So how do you say more than one sweater?
2 sweaters?
Sweaters. Very good. I bought 2 sweaters.
I bought 2 sweaters.
Excellent. So Wei Chung, tell me what you did yesterday.
I fixed the shower in the kitchen.
In the kitchen. You fixed the shower in the kitchen?
Oh no, in the bedroom.
Ah, the bathroom. Okay, so what did you do yesterday?
I fixed the shower in the bathroom.
Very good. There are many ways to correct students' errors. Teachers need to use a variety of correction techniques in the classroom. Sometimes teachers need to make a quick correction and move on. The explicit correction works well for this. Other times, it's important for students to self-correct or to offer help in correcting an error. In this case, the correction will take longer, but more students will benefit from the correction. If students help each other, they can also confirm their own learning and language ability. With any technique, don't wait so long that students lose the point of the correction. You may have to make the correction yourself if no one can supply the correction. These techniques will help you feel more confident when correcting errors in the classroom and will become more natural the more you use them.
Okay. So we have seen speaking so far, error correction in speaking so far. Now let's move on to writing. I want you to have a look at this writing, please. Take a minute to scan it. This is an A2 student. It's A1 transitioning to A2. And the instruction was to write about an amazing experience they had using the simple past. Okay. Now, I would like you to write in the chat, please. What would you correct first? Would you focus on content? Would you focus on form? Would you correct all the verbs? There are mistakes with prepositions as well. Would you also correct the prepositions? Very briefly, 1 or 2 words, please, in the chat. What would you focus your correction on in this specific piece of writing? Yeah. In the kitchen. So we have tense, verbs, verb tenses. Nice, Dorita. It says, first I would say, great job. Great job. And we will go back to Dorita's answer a little bit later. Thank you, Osvaldo. First, I would correct the verbs, verb tenses, verb. There are some mistakes, but students got clear ideas. Look at me, the preposition. That's right. There are a lot of things to correct. So our brains, our teacher brains, split in 2 when we have to correct writing. We focus on content and we focus on form. And the things that we evaluate are the following. Is the message understood? Is it coherent? Do ideas move smoothly? Do they transition smoothly? Is there a communication breakdown in all of it, in part of it? And when we focus on form, we think of punctuation. Is it appropriate? Do grammar mistakes prevent communication? Is spelling correct? Etc., etc. So if we have to make a parallel to the speaking techniques, we would say that to correct content, we might need a more delayed correction. But to correct form, we tend to do it immediately. How so? This will be for immediate correction. We usually have, a less traditional way of doing it. You identify the error type, like the ones you wrote in the chat, and the code, you would develop a code to represent that error type. The only thing is that it's very important to let the student know what your code is so that you can speak the same language since the very beginning. Yes. So, but it's kind of easy. It's word order, WO, verb form, T, tense, article, pronoun, preposition, which are the most frequent, right? Subject, verb agreement, number error, negation, spelling error, etc. So you would use a code for the most frequent. So let's go back to this writing. If some of you said tense, the majority said verbs, verb tense. So which code would you use? Probably the T, right? Please, in this writing, I would like you to, in the chat, I would like you to choose one or two words from this paragraph, and next to it, write the code. That is, for example, the first one would be here, feel. In the chat, you write feel, and then you write the T for text, for tense. What would you correct here? VF for verb form. Thank you, Lilia. So you would use that for feel, maybe. Yes. Here, for example, we have started. Assuming the student has seen the past perfect, this would be also a problem with tense. Then we have I'm late instead of I was late. That will be tense as well. Here, the ideal expression would be 5 minutes late, but you don't have to correct all of it, right? That will be way too overwhelming. But if we're going to focus on the tense, then we have confused, tense, got confused. Here, feel, tense again. And then feel, tense again. And then looked, no ED. Of course, there are other mistakes, as you pointed out. There are other mistakes such as vocabulary. There are other mistakes such as preposition. Yes, look, it says looked me instead of looked at me. So, but do you have to correct all of them? Not necessarily. Now look how overwhelming. Yeah, it lacks prepositions, Christian, too. Look, it's kind of overwhelming, right? But if we take Dorita's advice, we can also start pointing out what he did right. Because in the previous slide, we identified all the corrections to be made. And that is one way to go. However, remember what we said at the beginning, especially at early stages, we need to focus on their progress more than their failures. Not exclusively, just more than their failures, so that they can keep their motivation long enough for them to see the actual progress. Another possibility would be this. Remember, he had to use the simple past, and he did right. He did it right. 7 years ago, I went to school. I entered, not in class, but I entered the class. I looked. Here you would decide if it's necessary to correct the preposition or to leave it for later. And went. Yes? So you have went, entered, looked, went, learned. Notice the difference. In the first case, you were focusing on the failures, on the things that needed to be corrected. But here you're focusing on the things that he did right. And when you give this paper back, you can say, yeah, way to go. However, if you notice, these are the verbs that are correct, but I didn't circle all the verbs. Why do you think that is? There are some mistakes. These verbs are correct, but I didn't circle all the verbs. Please identify the verbs that I didn't circle. Are they correct? So that way, that's right, Erica, to make emphasis on his progress, which is just as valid. It's true. He made mistakes, but he also made progress. It's your decision what to focus on to motivate your students. Now, let's continue now with receptive skills. Normally, it's more evident to see mistakes and errors when we talk about productive skills. But it doesn't mean that there are problems in understanding. So when we think of listening and reading, how do we correct mistakes? Let's suppose we're not going to listen to the conversation, but let's suppose your students just listen to a conversation between a wife and a husband in which the woman, yes, the wife is concerned about her husband's health and he wants to practice a sport. You know that the answers are these. The man wants to try out for the company basketball team. The woman's worried that her husband's health isn't good. First the woman suggests that her husband see a doctor. Her husband should eat less fatty foods. Those are the right answers, but your students give you this, and they give you this and this. Out of 4 answers, 2 incorrect and 2 correct answers. Now, it is important to, it depends. If you check all of them at once, first, it's ideal to focus on the things they did right. If you're checking one by one, something that works really well is not acknowledging the first answer that you receive. Why? When your students raise their hands, or if they are victims, maybe, teacher, I want to do the first one, and they make a mistake, they are being vulnerable. They are in the spotlight. They either raise their hands or you chose a victim, but they are in the spotlight. So it takes some courage to volunteer. So your students, if they made a mistake, it's a good idea to say, are you sure? Or you can give them like a help card. That's their opportunity to ask for help to another person, to their partner maybe. So it's teamwork. So are you sure? If he still insists on the incorrect answer, you say, thank you. Because it's true, it takes courage to volunteer. You just say, thank you. You don't say, way to go. But you don't say, no, that's not correct. Yes, you say, okay, let's hold on and let's see if somebody else has another answer. Thank you for your answer. Let's compare with somebody else. So you are making other people give the right answer. This is in the case of listening. What happens with reading? Reading comprehension and possible mistakes. Here we have an article. This has been taken from the WorldLink book. And in this short article, they are talking about dating. Yes, dating in different countries. They are interviewing different people. And here the students read about, let me show you. They read about these answers to these two questions. The first one is, do teenagers date in your country? And the second question is, imagine you like someone. Do you invite the person to go on a date with you? And then here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people giving the answer. I'm sorry, 4. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Yeah, giving the answer. Now, you have the answer key or you have done the activity, and we have, who thinks most teenagers don't have time today? In-ho. The answer for number 2, who thinks going out in a group is a good way to meet people? In-ho and Niels. Who thinks most teenage couples break up? Aaron. Who thinks a woman can ask a guy on a date? Aaron and Niels. And finally, who thinks a man should ask a woman on a date? That is Valentina, right? These are the answers, but your students, if your students make a mistake, then the ideal thing to do is ask them to support their answer. Where did you get that information? Because once again, remember what we saw at the beginning. It could be an error or a mistake. Maybe it's not that your student does not understand the passage. He got confused, or maybe he misunderstood the question, and paying closer attention or having a closer look, he could understand the meaning of the question or the idea of the paragraph. So to correct a mistake, it's not enough just to substitute it for the correct answer, but asking them to go deeper. Where did you get that information? And giving them some time for individual work or group work so that they can compare the thought process they had and the thought process of their classmates. Remember, when your students go to your classes, they go for English classes, but they end up learning something else. They learn to learn. They learn strategies. So when correcting mistakes, we should also reinforce the strategies for them to become more independent. This is what they practice in class, but they can totally do this out of class. So this is what we want to do. Now to finish, we have feedback. Is it possible not to give feedback in any case? Is it necessary to always correct or to always give feedback? Can we just let it pass? Please, can you, in the chat box, could you give me one situation in which it's just, no, I'm not going to correct this. Please, in the chat box, say one word or 2 words that illustrate why you would decide not to give feedback or not to correct something. Let's see. Okay, don't worry, don't worry. What is true most of the times is that if the student made a question about something or made a mistake in something that he's not been taught yet, probably it would be better not to make that correction. That's right, Osvaldo, totally agree. I totally agree. When it's not appropriate for the level. Sometimes we have curious students who make additional questions. Yeah, that's okay. Or they want to give it a try with something new they saw in a movie and they don't use it correctly. Or also the emotional stage. It just reminded me of a case. Aldo, thank you. That's correct. That's true. Feedback could be done focusing on the good answers. Answers are personal. Yeah, in that case, it might be a good idea not to say anything. So if it's something that has not been taught yet, and it's something that could take longer to explain, it's better to avoid correction or to avoid feedback. Or as Aldo said, if the emotional state of the student is not the best, and we can tell because we are a little bit psychologists, a little bit of everything, we have many hats, then it's better to save it for later. Yes, to be compassionate and save it for later. Because in the end, what we want is feedback to be effective. If our students are not receptive for any reason, then it's better to save. Thank you. Thank you very much for your answers. So, conclusions. We had basically 3 conclusions. 1, let's have a holistic view of our students. Consider what they think, what they feel, and what they know. Not just what they know. What the cognitive part is important, but it's just as important what they think and what they feel. Second, the stage in the lesson matters. Is it the practice stage when you're making the correction? Should it be immediate? Or is it the production stage? Should it be delayed? Errors take place in all the skills. Address them timely and kindly. And before we finish with a quote, I would like to see in the chat box if there is a takeout that you have here from this session. Anything that is not mentioned in the conclusion, but you can take home today. Is there any idea that was not mentioned in the conclusions, but it's your take from today's session? You're more than welcome to share those ideas in the chat. Thank you, Aldo. If learning objectives have been met, feel free to share anything else you're taking from today's session that is not in the conclusions. All of these ideas are important to help our students remember this. The biggest mistake they can make is being afraid to make one. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Indira. That was really, really interesting. There are a few questions. I think we have time for one.
Yeah,
Someone's asking, how can we correct students without making them feel bad?
That's right. That's an interesting question. Actually, it's a delicate balance. We have to start. One of the techniques that helps a lot is what we saw in today's session. It's start with what they did right. Start with the good things. Because it's not that students or people in general cannot tolerate frustration. Remember, it's a strategy for life. So we just don't want to overwhelm them with what they have to correct. So one thing that helps reduce this uncomfortable feeling is 1, remind them of what they did right before telling them what they have to correct. 2, choose just 1 or 2 things, the most important things they have to correct. And 3, remind them in an explicit way. Be straightforward, no matter how many mistakes they make. Their intelligence, their self-worth is intact. It's still the same. It's just progress they have to focus on.